Hello, my name is Alister McGrath, and I'm a British theologian and intellectual historian with a special interest in the life and ideas of C.S. Lewis. And I recently wrote a biography of Lewis. I hold a chair of theology at King's College London, but before I moved to London I was Professor of Historical Theology at Oxford, which of course is Lewis's old university. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to this short series of 6 videos I've created to mark the 50th anniversary of the death of Lewis back in 1963. And these are my gift to you. You can use them for your own study or for church or college groups or distribute them to your friends, whatever you like really, so long as you don't use them for commercial purposes. I know Lewis's Oxford well. I was an undergraduate at Oxford back in the 1970s. I began as a scholar at Wadham College, like Lewis's close friend Owen Barfield, and I went on to become a senior scholar at Merton College, where many still remembered J.R.R. Tolkien, who was a fellow of that college until just before my arrival. And Lewis, of course, became a fellow of Magdalen College, Oxford in 1925. And you might enjoy this photograph of the college's fellows taken in 1928, shortly after Lewis's arrival. Lewis is on the back row, just behind the president of the college, and he would remain in this position until January 1955, when he took up the chair of Medieval and Renaissance English at the University of Cambridge. I became an Oxford Don myself in the 1980s. After 25 years as an Oxford Don, I moved to London in 2008, but I still keep my Oxford links, including being a senior research fellow at Harris Manchester College, Oxford University. And I'm recording these videos on location at this lovely college in the heart of the beautiful city of Oxford, which still remembers and values Lewis. And Harris Manchester College is a very appropriate venue for these recordings. Why, you might ask? Well, because Lewis gave one of his very first lectures here some 90 years ago. In his diary, Lewis tells us that on the 6th of March 1924, he came here to Manchester College, as it was then known, to speak to the postgraduates philosophical group on the hegemony of moral values. Now, of course, there is more to Lewis than Oxford. Lewis grew up in Ireland, as I did. In fact, we were both born in the Irish city of Belfast. Lewis also spent time at the University of Cambridge, as I did. He was a fellow at Magdalen College. I was a research student at St John's College, best known for its famous choir. At the time of Lewis's death in 1963, few, if any, expected him to be remembered by future generations. He was widely expected to be forgotten. New voices would arise to engage the questions of the turbulent 1960s and beyond. Yet Lewis has bounced back. He's now one of the best-known figures in Western culture. So why is that? Well, for a start, big-budget movies of his Narnia novels have made him a household name. Yet Lewis was famous long before those movies came along. In his day, he was celebrated as one of the world's experts on English literature, and his lectures at Oxford and Cambridge universities were packed out with eager students who hung on his every word. Yeah, I think Lewis is now remembered mainly for 2 reasons. First of all, as the author of the 7 novels that make up the Chronicles of Narnia. And these books, especially their showcase opener, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, have become classics of English literature. Lewis's close friendship with J.R.R. Tolkien, which began in the mid-1920s, led to the writing of both Lewis's Narnia series and also Tolkien's magnificent Lord of the Rings. Now, of course, Narnia and The Lord of the Rings are quite different, yet both of these works of fantasy bring home the power of well-told stories to captivate the imagination and to open up some of the biggest questions of human existence, like how we become good people or discover the meaning of life. And we'll look at that more in a later presentation. But the second thing for which Lewis is now remembered is his Christian writings. We need to remember, I think, Lewis was an angry atheist as a young man. He served in the British Army during the First World War and gave up on religion because of the suffering and destruction he saw around him. Like Richard Dawkins today, Lewis hurled thunderbolts at an uncaring God. However, over a period of years, he reconsidered his position and gradually came to the view that belief in God was the most satisfying way of making sense of things. First of all, Lewis realized that atheism was really rather dull and boring. And secondly, it didn't actually really answer any of the big questions of life. And in the end, he moved on and discovered God in a big way. Now, I am one of many who've come to appreciate Lewis's vision of the Christian faith. Like Lewis, I came up to Oxford as an angry atheist, and like Lewis, I changed my mind about this while I was at Oxford. I came to realize that my atheism was intellectually superficial and existentially inadequate. And I discovered Christianity and took delight in exploring this new world of faith. Lewis, I have to say, played no role in my conversion back in 1971. But as I continued to think about my new faith, my friends suggested I ought to read Lewis. You'll get a lot out of them, they told me, and they were right. I still have some of the books by Lewis that I bought back in 1974 and 75. Here's my copy of Lewis's Screw Tape Letters. And I bought this in Blackwell's bookstore in Oxford in May 1974. And here's my copy of the Reflections on the Psalms, which I bought in the same bookstore in February 1975. And you can see how the paper is yellowing with age. I still read Lewis today, and I still get a lot out of reading him. He's been my companion for 40 years, and each time I read Lewis, I seem to notice things that I failed to pick up the first time round. I owe that guy a lot. Now, because I got so much out of Lewis, I wanted to help others to do the same. And that's why I published 2 works on Lewis to mark his 50th anniversary. The first is a new biography of Lewis. I discovered Lewis through his writings, and this biography is aimed at others who've done the same thing. So if you've read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe or seen the movie, and you want to know more about the man behind them, then this book is for you. It's a book that aims to help you get more out of reading Lewis. And let me tell you, there's a lot to get out of him. It took me the best part of 5 years to write this book. So let me tell you how I did the research. First of all, I read all of Lewis Publishers' writings in the order in which they were written, and that took 15 months. Okay, it was a long time, but it helped me understand the development of both his ideas and his writing style. Secondly, I worked through the large body of literature devoted to Lewis and his circle, partly to make sure I was up to date with my scholarship, but mainly because it was becoming increasingly clear that a lot of important points had been missed or misunderstood by those who'd been there before me. And finally, I worked through historical archives, especially in London, Oxford, Cambridge, and Wheaton, Illinois. And this archive work led to lots of interesting new finds. Now here's one of them from the archives of University College, Oxford. This shows C.S. Lewis in May 1917, aged 18 years and 6 months. Shortly after his arrival in Oxford to begin his studies, but also to train for military service in the First World War. This is the first time this lovely photograph has been reproduced in a biography of Lewis. Another important document, also held in an Oxford archive, tells us about Lewis's time as an officer cadet training for military service in the summer of 1917. And this interesting document records Lewis joining E Company of No. 4 Officer Training Battalion on the 7th of May 1917. This document also helps us to answer another question. Why did Lewis join the Somerset Light Infantry? Biographers of Lewis have been baffled by his choice of regiments because Lewis had no connection with the county of Somerset at all. His best friend in this cadet training unit was Paddy Moore. I think we could understand it if Lewis wanted to join the same regiment as Paddy Moore, but Moore was posted to the Rifle Brigade. So why did Lewis join the Somerset Light Infantry? I think this document may answer this question. Paddy Moore's record refers to him as Cadet EMC Moore. Now look at it closely. On the left-hand side, the record lists the sponsoring regiment. In other words, the regiment that Moore would have expected to join after training. And there we find the clue. It's an abbreviated reference to, you've guessed it, the Somerset Light Infantry. That was the regiment Moore expected to join, and it makes sense because Moore came from the city of Bristol, part of which is in Somerset. So Lewis probably joined the Somerset Light Infantry because he wanted to serve alongside his best friend. In the end, Moore was posted to the Somme with the Rifle Brigade, so Lewis went to war on his own without any friends. Here's something else interesting you won't have seen before. This is a list of candidates for a Classics Fellowship at Magdalen College, Oxford University, in 1922. And 8th on this handwritten list of names is C.S. Lewis of University College. Now, he didn't get the position, and actually that's not surprising, because some of the names on this list became world authorities on classics during the 1930s. He faced stiff competition. So that's the first book I produced to mark the 50th anniversary of Lewis's death. But I also wrote a second book to mark this anniversary. So let me tell you about this second book called The Intellectual World of C.S. Lewis. And this consists of 8 major essays on aspects of Lewis's intellectual vision. None of them have appeared in print before, and they all arise from the research underlying the biography. So I look at some questions in detail, like the curious nature of his autobiography Surprised by Joy, his so-called intellectual new look in the 1920s, and his use of very strongly visual images, light, blindness, sight, throughout his writings, of course including the Chronicles of Narnia. This series of 6 informal presentations is going to look at some major themes in Lewis's thought. In the next presentation, we're going to look at the reasons for Lewis's move away from atheism, initially towards belief in God, and then to Christianity. What was it that he found so attractive and persuasive about Christianity? In the third presentation, we'll look at the date of Lewis's conversion, because there are very good reasons for thinking that the traditional date may need review. The fourth presentation moves on to look at what I think is one of the most remarkable aspects of Lewis's thought, the way in which he holds together reason and imagination. And this, I think, is really important to understanding Lewis's approach to apologetics. In the fifth presentation, we look at the Chronicles of Narnia, especially the way in which Lewis used stories to open up important questions in the ways that really go far beyond the limits of logical analysis. And finally, we come to look at Lewis on the Christian hope. What did Lewis think about heaven, and how did it impact on his life, especially towards the end of that life? So when you're ready, join me for the second presentation. What was it that Lewis found so appealing about Christianity? Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.